Hello, everybody. Hope you had a good weekend, and here is our screencast for this weekend. So, Chapter 6 and 7 main ideas energy in the cell. Let's review ATP a little bit. ATP is the energy essential to life. All cell processes require it. It is the major energy molecule of the cell. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. It is an adenosine molecule with 3 phosphate groups attached to it, and there's our chemical formula for ATP below. Energy of ATP is available to the cell when the bonds are broken between the phosphate groups. And here we have our little animation showing the high energy bond between the second and third phosphate. Hydrolysis of high energy by water, energy used for an endergonic reaction. Energy goes into the reaction in an endergonic reaction. When first phosphate group breaks off, left with ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. It's 2 phosphates bonded to adenosine. And now let's talk about photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a process that plants use to trap the sun's energy and build carbohydrates, called glucose. Photo stands for light. Synthesis is making something. So photosynthesis is making something using light. Glucose molecules are storage of energy in cells, as we know in cellular respiration. So below, here's our overall reaction. We have carbon dioxide plus water and light energy, and chlorophyll is an enzyme in plants that constructs carbohydrates, and the products of this reaction are carbohydrates and oxygen. Carbohydrates in the form of glucose, which we will remember are monosaccharides, simple sugars. So again, CO2, there's 3 ways to represent this formula. So we've got the chemical formula for carbon dioxide, CO2 plus H2O, which is water, light energy, and chlorophyll. And then we get our C6H12O6, which is our glucose, and our O2, which is oxygen. And then we have to balance this chemical formula. So we have 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O get us 1 glucose and 6 oxygen. So that should be kind of familiar to you guys, because if we reverse that formula, we have our general formula for cellular respiration if we go in the other direction. Photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplast. The chloroplast is an organelle which is exclusive to plant cells. If we recall, chloroplasts contain thylakoid membranes which contain the pigment chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a pigment which absorbs almost all wavelengths of light except green light. This light is reflected, which is why plants have a green color often. So the green is the green wavelength of light, which is a little physics, but we won't get too deep into that. But the green wavelength of light is reflected by the chlorophyll, giving most plants their green color. Photosynthesis occurs in 2 stages: light-dependent reactions, the conversion of sunlight energy into chemical energy, ATP molecules, and light-independent reactions. ATP produced is used to fuel the reactions that produce glucose. So sometimes these are called light reactions and dark reactions, but it would be more accurate to call them light-dependent reactions and light-independent reactions. Light-dependent reaction. Sunlight is needed for this stage of photosynthesis. Sunlight hits the thylakoid membranes, and energy from the sun is transferred to electrons. The energized electrons are transferred to the electron transport chain, which should be familiar to us all, as we discuss the electron transport pretty in depth when we discuss cellular respiration. So here's our diagram. We've got our light wave coming and going into photosystem 2 and the outside thylakoid. The thylakoid space takes H2O and removes protons and oxygen and electrons, and the electrons use the cytochrome complex, which in turn uses an electron to make a NADPH, which is a different molecule from NADH, and then photosystem 1, and then there's carbon fixing reactions, and ATP is used with that proton gradient. Light-dependent reactions, the electron transport chain, a series of proteins that are in the thylakoid membrane. The electrons are passed from protein to protein, losing energy each step of the way. The energy lost is used to make ATP molecules. So we've got our little animation down here showing how this process is going down, and there's electrons being built up, and then we've got our hydrogen proton gradient, and our final molecule, our final protein in the membrane space of the thylakoid down here is going to use those hydrogen protons to start constructing ATP. And starts all over again. Whole series of proteins in our thylakoid membrane. So we've got our NADH molecule, oxidation of NADH, energy is produced, hydrogen protons, that's a active transport. Hydrogen protons are transported across the membrane, building a gradient, and the electrons are also produced. So it goes through a series of steps again, building that hydrogen proton gradient. Oxygen is produced as a byproduct, water as well, and there we have our ATP. Light-dependent reactions. After this, electrons pass down a second electron transport chain. The electrons transfer their remaining energy to make NADPH molecules, which are needed in the light-independent reactions. Water molecules are split to make more electrons available so that the light-dependent reactions continue. This is called photolysis. Light-independent reactions, light not needed for these reactions, also known as the Calvin cycle. Don't get this confused with the Krebs cycle. The Calvin cycle is photosynthesis, the Krebs cycle is cellular respiration. The Calvin cycle is a series of reactions that use carbon dioxide to form carbohydrates. It takes place in the stroma of the chloroplasts. The stroma is that inner membrane and inner space of the chloroplast. So there are a couple of different steps of the Calvin cycle and the light-independent reactions. There's carbon fixation. One carbon atom from carbon dioxide is added to a 5-carbon sugar called RUBP. The result is a 6-carbon sugar. A PGA formation, the 6-carbon sugar formed in the previous step is split to form 2 molecules of phosphoglyceric acid, PGA, which is a 3-carbon molecule. 2 molecules of phosphoglyceric acid, so 3 carbons each from that 6-carbon sugar. The use of ATP and NADPH, ATP and NADPH are used to convert PGA into PGAL or PGAL, another 3-carbon molecule. And then glucose production occurs. After several rounds of the Calvin cycle, 2 molecules of PGAL leave the cycle to form glucose, a high-energy carbon molecule. ATP and PGAL replenish RUBP. Some PGAL molecules reform the 5-carbon sugar with the help of energy from ADP. each RUBP is ready to begin the Calvin cycle again. Since only one CO2 molecule is added to the cycle at a time, it takes 6 cycles to form 1 carbon sugar, glucose. So that our cycle is occurring 6 times to make 1 glucose, the Calvin cycle. So here's the overall, so we've got 3 molecules of CO2, providing 1 carbon each, 6 molecules of phosphoglycerate, 6 ATP are used. We got the 6 molecules diphosphoglycerate, NADPH is used. We've got the glyceraldehyde, and we get 1 molecule of the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. These become sugars, fatty acids, and amino acids. The glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate becomes ribulose 5-phosphate, and that's our RUBP. It replenishes what's needed for the cycle. 3 molecules of CO2 fixed give a net yield of 1 molecule of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate at a net cost of 9 molecules of ATP and 6 molecules of NADPH, which is not much because, as we know, in cellular respiration we can get up to 36 to 38 molecules of ATP through cellular respiration. So we're still at a net energy gain. So C3 photosynthesis. It is called C3 because the CO2 is first incorporated into a 3-carbon compound. The stomata are open during the day. Rubisco, the enzyme involved in photosynthesis, is also the enzyme involved in the uptake of CO2. Photosynthesis takes place throughout the leaf. The adaptive value, it's more efficient than C4 and CAM plants under cool and moist conditions and under normal light because it requires less machinery, fewer enzymes, and no specialized anatomy. So most plants are C3 plants that do C3 photosynthesis. So these are your trees and bushes that you see throughout, San Diego that are doing C3 photosynthesis. Then we've got C4 photosynthesis, and it's called C4 because the CO2 is first incorporated into a 4-carbon compound. The stomata are also open during the day. However, it uses PEP carboxylase for the enzyme involved in the uptake of CO2. This enzyme allows CO2 to be taken into the plant very quickly, and then it delivers the CO2 directly to Rubisco for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis takes place in inner cells, requires special anatomy called Cran's anatomy, and the adaptive value photosynthesizes faster than C3 plants under high light intensity and high temperatures, has better water use efficiency, the stomata not open as much. So C4 plants include several thousand species in at least 19 plant families. The example would be a 4-winged saltbush pictured here, corn, and many of the plants, summer annual plants, so plants that bloom in the summer. And then we have CAM photosynthesis. The stomata open at night when evaporation rates are usually lower and are usually closed during the day. The CO2 is converted to an acid and stored during the night. During the day, the acid is broken down and the CO2 is released to Rubisco for photosynthesis. The adaptive value is better water use efficiency than C3 plants under arid conditions due to opening the stomata at night, no sunlight, lower temperatures, lower wind speeds, etc. May CAM idle. When conditions are extremely arid, CAM plants can just leave their stomata closed night and day. Oxygen given off in photosynthesis is used for respiration, and CO2 given off in respiration is used for photosynthesis. CAM idling does allow the plant to survive dry spells. So plants that are well adapted for dry, arid conditions. Cactus. CAM plants include many succulents such as cacti and agaves, and also some orchids and bromeliads. So when you think cam photosynthesis and cam plants, think cactus. Alright, so that concludes our our video lecture for photosynthesis. These are slides on cellular respiration. We've already done lots of cellular respiration. You should review that in preparation for our quiz on Thursday. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend, and we will see you tomorrow in class, and have a good